There are 35 people on death row in the state of Mississippi. This is part 2 of the series. Calebkers, 12 years on death row. The state of Mississippi sentenced Calebkers to death for the killings of two brothers. Carothers was meeting them for a narcotics deal when something went wrong, according to court filings. After pursuing one of the victims inside his house, Caleb shot both the guy and his sibling, murdering Frank Clark and Taylor Clark. A third man who had survived his wounds was also shot by Caleb. Lisa Joe Chamberlain, 17 years on death row. Chamberlain and her boyfriend Roger Lee Gillett were charged with the murders of Linda Heinzelman and Heinzelman's boyfriend Vernon Hullett. The criminal couple was dealing drugs, and fearing Linda would turn them in to the police, they decided to get rid of her. Her partner Vernon, who was actually Gillett's cousin, was at the house as well. They used a hammer to beat him to death, causing the hammer's metal handle to bend and cave in his skull. Linda passed away after 2 days of agony. Her throat was cut, and a plastic bag was pulled over her head to suffocate her. She was also beaten, stabbed, and essayed. After all that, she was suffocated by a pillow, which caused her death. Gillett and Chamberlain dismembered the corpses with a hacksaw, placed them in a chest freezer that had been put into Hullett's vehicle, and then drove 15 hours, or over 1,000 miles, while bringing 7 bags of evidence that they dumped at the Russell County landfill. Gillett and Chamberlain towed the truck into a shed at the Waldo farm, owned by Gillett's family. According to court filings, at that point they plugged in the freezer and sealed it with a roll of gray duct tape. As people witnessed Lisa Joe Chamberlain and Roger Gillett selling meth while driving around in the victim's car, they called the police, who opened an investigation and subsequently charged the two with murder. Ricky Chase, 33 years on death row. On August 14, 1989, an elderly couple named Doris and Elmer Hart were robbed at their house outside of Hazelhurst by Ricky Chase and Robert Washington. It was acknowledged that the two had physically overcome Mrs. Hart before robbing the house of a number of valuables, namely cash and firearms. Elmer Hart returned home during the robbery, and both Chase and Washington claimed that the other was the mastermind behind the scheme and that it was they who had shot and killed Hart. Washington testified against Chase after entering a guilty plea and being given a life sentence. Charles Ray Crawford, 29 years on death row. Crawford was detained in 1992 on charges of serious violence and essay. He was taken into custody on bond after being suspected of killing a young lady. He was given a 66-year prison term after being found guilty of essay in 1993. After being found guilty of murder in 1994, he received a death sentence. The death penalty was the only appropriate punishment, according to the prosecution. Pathologist Dr. Stephen Hain stated in his testimony that Christie had only had one chest stab wound. Christie sustained many abrasions to her lower limbs, right and left, along with skin scrapes on her back and buttocks. She also had abrasions on her wrist, contusions on her lips, and scrapes on her face and chest. Christie's wrist injuries made sense given that she was chained. According to Hain's testimony, the scrapes discovered on Christie's thigh and buttocks happened while she was still alive and were in line with injuries one may sustain during a fight-or-flight reaction. Additionally, he stated in his testimony that Christie's injuries were compatible with being dragged along a hard surface, possibly branches or twigs. The wounds also matched those sustained by someone trying to elude or resist being essayed. Instead of being pulled, Christie's face abrasions and lip contusion were consistent with her face being forced against a hard surface. Christie died as a result of a major stabbing wound to her left mid-chest that pierced her lung and heart and caused significant internal and external bleeding. Christie passed away in 1 to 2 minutes. David Dickerson, 11 years on death row. During the mid-1990s, David Dickerson and Paula Harrington were romantically involved and had a child named Courtney Dickerson. Dickerson, aside from unpleasant correspondence, didn't stay in touch with Paula or Courtney after their breakup. Later on, Paula wed Alan Hamilton. Besides Courtney, she had 2 other kids. Paula resided on land close to Wesson, Mississippi with her family. They shared a home with Robin Harrington, Paula's sister. In addition, a number of other family members resided on the land, including Linda Austin. an aunt who dwelt in a trailer behind Paula's home. Paula filed for a protective order against Dickerson in 2010 on the grounds that he was following her and Courtney, who was 16 at the time. She also claimed to have been stalked in a criminal affidavit. A hearing on the relevant criminal charges was scheduled for January 25, 2011, and the protection order was entered. Around 6:30 a.m. on January 25, 2011, Robin was standing outside Paula's house when she noticed a man on the land. Paula walked outside to look into it when she told her. Paula yelled at Robin to call 911 as soon as she heard a gunshot. According to Robin's testimony, Paula returned home covered in blood, with the man pursuing her and requesting the keys to a van. David Dickerson was the man that Robin identified. When Kayla Harrington, Paula's younger daughter, who was 13 at the time, heard from her aunt Robin that a man was outside the house, she was getting ready for school. According to Kayla's testimony, she heard screaming after Paula stepped outdoors, so she followed suit. Kayla observed a man playing around with a gun. After hearing 2 gunshots, she hurried back inside to retrieve her younger brother. They ran into the restroom and Kayla shut the door behind her. When Robin joined the kids in the restroom, Kayla called 911. When Kayla peeked out the window, she observed the man dousing the camper in gas before grabbing the gas can and taking off. Kayla stated in her testimony that she overheard Courtney, her sister, identify the man as David Dickerson. When Courtney's aunt Robin noticed the man outside, Courtney was also getting ready for school. According to Courtney's testimony, Paula stepped outside, and when she heard screams, everyone fled the house. She witnessed David Dickerson, her father, putting a gun to her mother's head. Dickerson struck Courtney in the face when she attempted to push him away from her mother. Courtney raced to her aunt Linda's trailer after Paula told her to go there. Paula arrived at the trailer shortly later, covered in blood. After letting her in, they secured the door. As soon as Dickerson kicked in the door, Linda pointed a gun at him. Dickerson threatened to shoot Courtney if she would not lay down her gun, pointing his own at her. Courtney and Linda left the trailer once Paula gave them the order to do so. According to Courtney's testimony, Dickerson was seen pouring gasoline all over Paula and the trailer as he was holding a gas can. Courtney ran back to Paula's house while Linda ran to a neighbor's house. Then Courtney noticed the trailer was on fire. While passing Paula's house in their car, Reverends Ken Hatchpet and Thomas McCormick witnessed the trailer blow up. They entered the driveway and sprinted in the direction of the burning trailer. The Reverends noticed a man standing close to the trailer. Under the trailer, they discovered Paula trapped, alive, and on fire. They stated in their testimony that she smelled like gasoline when they pulled her away. Despite the man's best efforts, Paula passed away before the police could come. She had first-degree burns, stab wounds to her neck and torso, and gunshot wounds to her head and back. Leslie Galloway, 13 years on death row. Galloway was convicted by the jury of essaying Shaquilia Anderson in December 2008. After severing her throat, he lit her ablaze and ran a car over her. It was the most graphic crime scene that an investigator had ever seen. The victim was a student at Harrison Central High School. A few days after her death, hunters in the DeSoto National Forest found her body. According to expert witnesses, remnants of her body were discovered beneath Galloway's mother's Ford Taurus. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.